Unit 4, Learning Target Number 3. Simplify absolute values of numbers and plot them on a number line. Absolute value is a concept you've probably never heard of until today. The absolute value of a number is its distance from zero. So the most important thing is that the absolute value of a number is its distance from zero. What does that mean? Well, let's take an example. Here is the number 5. The number 5. What is the absolute value of the number 5? Well, it's the distance of the number 5 from 0. So how far from 0 is the number 5? Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces from 0. So the absolute value of the number 5 is 5. And we use these symbols to indicate the absolute value. What is the absolute value then of, say, for example, a negative number? Say we have negative 3. What is the absolute value of negative 3? Well, if we look here on our number line, 3 is exactly 1, 2, 3 spaces from 0. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So let's take a look at a few problems. Remember that the absolute value symbol are these two little bars right beside each other. They mean absolute value. So here we are asked to find the absolute value of negative 2. Well, let's find its distance from 0. Here's negative 2, and let's count to 0. There's 1 space and 2 spaces. So the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. Let's try it again with this one, 42. Now we don't have 42 on our number line, but we can imagine 42 is out here somewhere. 42 is how many spaces from 0? It's 42 spaces from 0. So the absolute value of 42 is 42. Note, this is not the opposite. We're not taking the opposite. We're counting the distance from 0. So the absolute value of 42 is not negative 42. It's just 42. Whatever's in these absolute value signs, it's going to be the positive result. If you see the negative symbol outside the absolute value bars, as it is right here, the negative outside the absolute value bars, that means we're going to take the opposite. Remember that a negative sign means we're going to take the opposite of a thing. We're going to take the opposite of the absolute value of 7. So in this case, let's first find the absolute value of 7. We start at 7 and we count our way back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 7 spaces. So the absolute value of 7 is 7. And then we want to take the opposite of that, so we keep our negative sign. So the negative stays. In this case, we have another one. We have a negative of the absolute value of negative 5. So what's the absolute value of negative 5? Well, let's find out. Here's negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. And we want to take the negative of that, so it is negative 5. So in both cases, you see, the negative stays because we are simply taking the opposite of the absolute value. And in both cases, with negative 5, the absolute value is 5. With 7, the absolute value is 7. We're taking the opposite of that, so we're taking the negative in both instances. All right, now let's take a look at some operations with our absolute values. Here we have the absolute value of 5 added to the absolute value of negative 2. So the first thing we want to do, we want to treat these kind of like, if you remember PEMDAS, the first thing that we always did was parentheses. And we're going to treat these kind of like parentheses. We'll do these first. So the absolute value of 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5. Added to the absolute value of negative 2. So how far was negative 2 from 0? 1, 2 spaces. And 5 plus 2 is equal to 7. So our answer is 7. Now let's take a look at number 2. We have the same kind of problem. Again, we're going to do the absolute value signs first. Negative 8, the absolute value of negative 8 is, well, we start with 8. We can imagine it's right here. Then it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8. From that, we're going to subtract the absolute value of negative 3. The absolute value of negative 3 is 1, 2, 3. So 8 minus 3 is equal to 5. And that's our answer. All right, let's take a look at a few word problems with absolute values. Here we have number 1. Sperm whales can dive up to 4,500 meters. Express this as an absolute value. So here is our whale, creepy looking guy there. They can dive up to 4,500 meters. So we want to think of that as an absolute value. Yes, the whale is going down 4,500 meters. So if we want to think about it, that's really negative 4,500 meters. But that's not really what we think about when they're diving. We don't think of it in terms of being negative 4,500 meters. We just think of it as being 4,500 meters. So we would write that as the absolute value of negative 4,500, just like that. And number 2, the temperature drops from 72 degrees to 35 degrees one autumn afternoon. Express this change as an absolute value. Well, the temperature, if we go from 72 down to 35, is actually going negative. We're actually dropping a negative amount of degrees. So we want to express the change as an absolute value. So let's think about it. How far are we going down? Well, 72 minus 35 will tell us that. Got to borrow 1 from here. That'll make us 12 there. 12 minus 5 is 7. 6 minus 3 is 3. We went down 37 degrees. 37 degrees. But what we want to do is express that as an absolute value. So we're going to say the absolute value of negative 37.